They didn't break up. They didn't open their relationship to fix anything. And they didn't expect their lives to change permanently. What started as an honest conversation between two long-term partners became a relationship structure that now includes three equal adults, one shared home, and one shared future. This isn't a story about shock value. It's a story about what happens when people follow curiosity instead of fear, and how that decision quietly reshaped everything they thought they knew about love, commitment, and family. And the most surprising part, according to them, it now feels completely normal. The question that changed everything. In 2020, Alana Underwood had been in a committed relationship with Kevin Jankay for over 3 years. By all outside standards, their relationship was stable, loving, and familiar. But privately, Alana was sitting with a question she had never fully explored. For most of her life, she had dated men and identified as straight, not because she felt forced to, but because that's what her life naturally looked like. Still, she says there was always a quiet thought in the background. What if there's more to understand about who I am? This wasn't about dissatisfaction. It wasn't about a secret life. It was about curiosity and honesty. So instead of ignoring it, she did something many people never do. She talked to her partner. Kevin listened. And rather than reacting with fear or defensiveness, he stayed open. Together, they made a decision, one they believed would be temporary, carefully communicated, and emotionally respectful. They would explore this curiosity together. At the time, they thought it would be a single experience. Nothing more. They were wrong. An unexpected connection. Through a dating app, Alana and Kevin connected with Megan Smith, who was married at the time. What followed wasn't rushed or impulsive. The four adults spent nearly a month talking online, setting expectations, checking comfort levels, and building trust before ever meeting in person. By the time they finally met, nerves were high. For Alana, this wasn't just a new relationship dynamic. It was her first romantic experience with another woman. She later described feeling internally overwhelmed, unsure how she'd react, unsure what emotions would surface. Megan, confident and calm, helped ground the moment. At first, the relationship between the group was clearly defined. According to Kevin, it was purely physical, with emotional boundaries clearly in place. But something unexpected began to happen. They kept meeting. And during long drives home, Alana and Kevin started having conversations they hadn't planned for. They weren't just processing what had happened. They were processing how they felt. Because feelings were forming, slowly, unintentionally, and honestly. And once those feelings were acknowledged, there was no way to ignore them. When life forces a pause. Several months into this evolving dynamic, Megan and her wife separated, for reasons Megan says were unrelated to Alana and Kevin. Out of respect, the group paused their connection. No pressure. No assumptions. Just space. But months later, they reconnected. This time with clarity. By January 2021, they officially defined themselves as a throuple, 3 adults choosing to build a committed relationship together. Not as an experiment. Not as a phase. As a real partnership. And then came the real test. Living together. 3 people, 1 small apartment, 1 very real adjustment. Their first shared home was a 600-square-foot apartment. 1 bedroom. 1 bathroom. 1 bed expanded with an air mattress. This wasn't curated for social media. It was practical. And sometimes uncomfortable. They rotated who slept in the middle each night, not as a gimmick, but as a symbol of intentional fairness. They talked constantly. About space. About emotions. About moments where someone felt left out. Because they knew something important. Equality doesn't mean sameness. Each relationship within the throuple was different, and that had to be accepted, not forced into symmetry. Megan's connection with Alana was different from her connection with Kevin. And that difference wasn't a threat. It was just reality. Learning that distinction between fairness and identical treatment became one of the foundations of their relationship. Why this didn't fall apart? Many people assume relationships like this fail because of jealousy. But according to the trio, jealousy wasn't ignored, it was addressed. Openly. If someone felt insecure, they said it. If someone needed reassurance, they asked for it. Kevin later described the structure using a metaphor. A pyramid. Strong because of multiple points of support. If tension existed between two people, the third could offer perspective, not as a referee, but as a grounding presence. It didn't eliminate conflict, but it changed how conflict was handled. And over time, what once felt unconventional began to feel routine. The move that made it feel real. Eventually, they moved to Colorado. This time, into a larger house. More space. More privacy. 3 bathrooms, a detail they laugh about now. By this point, their relationship no longer felt like a concept. It felt like home. Kevin later said the most surprising thing wasn't the attention they received. It was how ordinary their daily life became. Because when you're living something every day, it stops feeling like a headline. It just feels like life. Telling their families. No matter how stable something feels internally, it still exists within a wider world. And for them, that meant telling their parents. Megan's mother was immediately supportive, described by the group as open-minded and accepting. For Alana, the conversation was nerve-wracking. She explained that she was bisexual and that she had a girlfriend who was also her boyfriend's girlfriend. Her parents were shocked. But after the initial surprise, their response shifted from disbelief to curiosity. They asked questions. They tried to understand. And eventually, they accepted. For Kevin, the experience was harder. His parents struggled deeply with the news. After the conversation, his mother told him she wasn't okay with his relationship, and they didn't speak for nearly 2 years. Even now, their communication remains limited. But Kevin says there's no anger. Only patience. Because acceptance, he believes, happens on different timelines. Why they took their story online. Several years into their relationship, the trio decided to share parts of their life on TikTok under the name Camp Throuple. Not to persuade. Not to provoke. But to show visibility. Their first video reached hundreds of thousands of views overnight. The response was overwhelming, not just criticism or curiosity, but gratitude. Messages from parents, from young adults, from people who said they finally had language for something they'd never seen represented. And that became the purpose. Not advocacy, but visibility. What they're careful to say. Despite their success, the trio is clear about one thing. They don't believe this structure is right for everyone. In fact, Megan has said that if their relationship ever ended, she isn't sure she would choose polyamory again. Because this isn't about a system. It's about people. 3 people who happen to align in timing, communication style, emotional capacity, and values. And that alignment isn't guaranteed. What they want others to take away isn't instruction, it's permission. Permission to define happiness for yourself. This story isn't about rewriting the rules of relationships. It's about understanding that there are more than one set of rules, and that honesty, communication, and consent matter more than structure. For some people, love looks traditional. For others, it doesn't. And neither is automatically right or wrong. What matters is whether the people involved feel seen, respected, and supported. But this raises a bigger question. Why do some relationship models face immediate judgment, while others are accepted without question? And what happens when visibility challenges long-held assumptions? That's what we'll explore next. Because this story doesn't end with three people living together. It opens a conversation about how society defines commitment and who gets to decide what normal really means. If you want to continue that conversation, the next video takes this story one step deeper.